Hey, parents out there, it's Markeisha and Courtney. I've been MIA, um, and Courtney's been holding it down. So thanks, Courtney, but we're back.
We're back. Life happens. We're moms. We keep it real around here. Life does not care what our personal lives don't care about our aspirations with our
Not.
podcasts and all that.
No, it does not. So we were chatting. We thought, like, let's make it a podcast because I'm sure parents out there also have experienced charts, behavior charts in the classroom as a classroom management tool.
Yeah.
And I can say that I did learn that when I was teaching general education and special education, that was a way to manage the kids.
Yeah, manage the classroom. A classroom management tool, right?
But the more you know, the better you do, right? And it's now I can see, not now, even before, what the problem is with the behavior charts.
Yeah.
We get a lot of kickback from this because I can hear the general education teachers saying, well, there's 30 students. How else do I monitor or let them know that their behavior is not acceptable in class? And, this is just the way we did it, the way we do it, the way I was taught. And I understand that, but this is for parents. So.
And the truth is, even my husband's an educator and he's taught multiple different grades. And he's also shared that he does not feel that they're overall, they're not effective. And it doesn't help intrinsically teach the kids. It's using shame essentially to get compliance. And one thing that we've been learning about individually and from even other educators and therapists out there on Instagram is the best way to manage behavior and get kids to do what they should be doing is for it to come within. And so if we're doing, I don't go off on a tangent, but even as a therapist, I would be like, earn 2 stars, then you get a sensory break. Mm-hmm. I now know that isn't wrong. I used to do that. Right. And so now I realize that if the child's not regulated, they're not available to learn or to learn to communicate. So even as a therapist, I've done things. I've been a SLPA for a long time. There's things I did that I thought were great. Mm-hmm. And then I learned they weren't. I adjusted and now I found a better way. And so I think as a parent too, just realizing that it is okay to say, I did this. I heard about this from Courtney and Markeisha. I'm going to try something different. Right. And release yourself of that shame going on forever. Because as a mom and as a therapist, I learn and grow and change. But being that we both have children with autism, I feel like it does not work. The clip chart only affects them even more negatively, in my opinion, than other students, because it's really hard for them to separate themselves from that or to take on that I'm a bad boy because I was on red, or I'm a bad girl because I was on red. They're not able to connect what happened before or even during that then led them there. Right. And so if they can't connect to that, to understand why they got moved down, and then some people leave them down there for a really long time. Right. So all they're fixated on is I'm still bad, or I'm on red. Now they're not learning.
Nope. They want to get off of red.
Yeah.
Want to get off of red because red is bad. And that makes me a bad person. Not even student. They probably think I'm bad. They're not saying, oh, what I did was bad, or I don't have words, because this actually, I'm going to share, happened to Joe. That's what we're talking about. I was going to dance around it, but I'm just not going to dance around it. It wasn't his teacher, it was a sub, which is something that we talk about in our More Than a Safety Plan workshop, right? And something that parents probably don't think about is like, what happens when there's a substitute teacher? So that isn't utilized when his teacher is, but she had a substitute teacher take off, right, for their own reasons. And he got put on red, and he's at home today because he could not get that. Sorry, I'm getting choked up.
Okay.
That's all he told us yesterday. I'm bad. I got on red. I got on red, and I'm bad. Well, what happened? Well, we're working on him expressing like things like that, like what questions. He couldn't tell me. I don't know. And I was crying, and it like he had a meltdown. She wasn't familiar with those types of things, and got put on red. And now I'm seeing red. No.
Yeah. He got overstimulated. Things got off of his typical schedule that happens in his class. He got dysregulated. We're going to just start breaking down these terms for our other parents out there. So that happens. Even as adult, I didn't necessarily have that term. Yeah, he got in trouble for getting dysregulated. And so we definitely don't want to be punishing someone for part of their disability, right. Part of something that happens if you have a sensory processing disorder, which is oftentimes part of what people experience with autism is that sensory piece, whether it's volume, noises, different types of noises, if they're loud, if somebody's tapping. I mean, quite honestly, I definitely I cannot go to sleep if the dryer is on. It just triggers me. I can't focus on anything. I just hear the clinking of the zipper. Mm-hmm. And so you can recognize in yourself, I'm feeling, it's stressful when your teacher's gone. That's why I'm not shaming anybody for taking off work, but that's why Craig rarely takes off work. He's like, it's so much work to take off work. And then so much can happen when you're gone that he's like, I would rather try to make it.
Right.
And so, but the truth is we can't avoid that. And so we are talking about this with the kind of the safety plan or the chart or noting in the subplans, but subplans are so important. I've had, parents that have worked with me on peanut allergies. And one of the things that I fought for on their behalf was we need a clear plan that's well documented for sub, because this is no joke. And then like you're saying, things happen over here. He got dysregulated. Something then on top of it was introduced that he doesn't use on a day-to-day basis, because it's supposed to be an individualized education and doesn't work for him. But that wasn't really clear. And so then on top of already feeling dysregulated because his teacher was gone, then he got more dysregulated because then something that's not even used with him, was brought in. And so really that team communication and school-wide communication is so important when we're talking about our kids that are on IEPs, because there's a lot of moving parts and there's things that can happen to our kids that are not okay when those things aren't clear. And this had to do with the boundary book I was reading, but it applies. Clear is kind. Mm-hmm. When we have clear, strategies, clear protocols,
clear plans.
Yep. It's kind to everybody. It's kind to Joe. It's kind to you. It's kind to the sub. Because imagine if it wasn't clear and they were using subs, I don't know what it is in California, but here the standard is so low right now for anything. It's like fingerprint clearance card, high school diploma. There's nothing against if you only have that high school diploma, but I'm just saying there is no additional training. There is no additional behavioral support or any of that. Maybe some schools do it, but it's not a requirement to become a sub, nor is it a requirement in my state for a long-term sub. Right. And so some subs are there for one day, other subs are there for an extended period of time or a maternity leave. And depending on your state's guidelines, there doesn't have to be this additional training or support for them. So what do they have to rely on? Subplans and what the team at the school is telling them, because they might not have that background. And those are just the facts of where we're at right now with job shortage, employee shortages across the board, it's happening more and more. So again, it's even more important to make sure that we're clear that we have a plan.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about behavior charts, and when I started to learn about, like you're saying, shame, we both read somewhere on the internets, like, how would you feel if you went to work and you were just, everyone knew that you were late, or you were having just a bad morning. Coffee didn't go right, it was too much traffic, you're running late, and then you get to work and you're on red.
For everyone to see.
And everybody knows your business. And we tend to feel like, kids are, they're people.
Yeah. And I think we wouldn't like it.
No.
But we somehow think, well, they're little. It's different. It's not. And in fact, I would argue, I don't want to be like extreme on it, but we're writing their story, those internal messages with all of, whether it's parenting or teachers, therapists, we're a part of their young mind that's developing, and what they're messaging that they're interpreting and putting into themselves. And I don't want my kids to think, I've actually had this conversation with my son with different meltdowns and things that happen. And he's like, well, how could you still love me? I wasn't nice in that moment. And I said, because I love you always. Right. And we're working through, how do we handle these different emotions? I said, mommy's had to work through handling different emotions and frustrations. And as we get older, it might change. It might be a missing file on our computer, but we can get, something you typed up that got deleted and you spent an hour working on it and your newsletter's gone. That frustrates me. That sends me my feeling red, right? I'm really frustrated. So what we're wanting is to start from that younger age of, I feel myself heating up. I feel like and then utilizing the tools, because we can see it in our society. I'm just going to call it out. We can see it in our society when people don't have tools to regulate, when they're getting upset, when they're getting frustrated, when they're driving and somebody is doing something that upset them, or maybe they just weren't that great of a driver in that moment. How we react is, again, we're pulling from our tools. And on our best day, right, we can say, whew, that was not, they cut me off. That wasn't very nice.
I was about to say, what about when we're in the car?
Yeah.
And we're like, what? Get up, honk, honk.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, Courtney, you're on red for the rest of the day. Your day is done. You have been upset at the traffic and flipped somebody the bird. Now, you wouldn't do anything like that.
I don't, because I'm scared. I honk sometimes, but I'm going to be honest.
You're a bad driver because you got upset in that moment. So
I get scared to honk at people nowadays. That's my whole point, is they don't regulate their emotions very well. And so even when you're, I've been at a stoplight and someone's not going, and I'll let the person behind me do the toot toot, because I'm like, I don't really want to set them off.
You don't want to come out here and hop in the car with Dre, though.
Yeah. So it's just those, but that's our goal for our kids, is teaching them those internal, recognizing their own, what makes each of us tick differently, and something that might really annoy you. I'm like, oh, and that's, I don't want to divert, but that's kind of the whole thing with big problem, little problem. And that the approach, again, I've done that in therapy, but the real issue with that is, what's a big problem to me is valid because it was a big problem to me. Now to someone else, they're like, that's not a big problem. That's no big deal.
Right.
But that's really hard to say, depending on what you have going on in your life, what that child had going on before or after school, leading up to that moment. There's a lot happening that we don't know about. And so teaching them those intrinsic, internal things is so much more effective than a chart. And I've just seen, Hannah never had those charts, but my other kids, it's been negative. It really, again, made them feel very, very bad about themselves long after talking in class, you know, or long after not doing something fast enough.
Right.
So I just opt out.
Yeah.
Opt out. If you can opt out, I think on any level, but especially if your kid has a 504 and IEP, you have additional protections. I know sometimes we think of these things as like, not me, but some people are like, I don't know if I want one. There's a lot of protections that you have with both of those. One of them is customizing your child's learning plan and saying that doesn't work for me. We're not
because the purpose really of discipline is to teach. It's not to be
compliant.
Yeah, it's to teach them about whatever their behavior or whatever they're doing, just for all kids. Discipline is not like now you do what I say, not for compliance or for be like I'm have autonomy over you. It's really to look at what the problem is and to teach them how to navigate that problem in the future. That's what discipline is, not to be like shameful. That's not changing that behavior. That child may go always be a talker. They might just be a talker. Or I was fostering Josiah's brother also back in the day. Long story back there. Him and his sister is adopted. There's a long story behind that. It all turned out, but he had been in a lot of homes, as so did Josiah. And his behavior in class was due to him not having due to a lot of things. First, not even being in school when he was supposed to. We just don't know what has happened. And even if it was a child that was not on an IEP, it could be a foster child. It would be a child that they could have lost their home last night. Their parent might work. I had a student before in general ed. His parent, one parent, worked at night, so he took care of all his siblings. And so when he came to school, sleep, knocked out. We just let him sleep. We found out like, well, why? Because when he was awake, Courtney, A's. When he was awake, he did excellent work.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, but you sleep. Then it's time to take a test, or do it, but then to sleep. And when we found out, so we asked him because we learned a lot of things along the way. And I'm saying we because me and Dre used to teach together about math and science, language arts, and he told us 6 siblings. My mom has to work at night. I have to take care of all everybody. And I'm tired. And it was a little one. So wake up and things like that. And so we just never know. And what if we would have like you're sleeping?
I'm on red for sleeping. But I mean, it's a behavior, but
not paying attention in class, you're on red. We don't know the story, and I can hear some of the it's difficult. I had a student, I was a general education student, so I had the class limits get pretty high out here. It is difficult, but you know what else, Courtney? Every student didn't need that type of
and what do we find? I think,
everyone didn't need that. So I wasn't doing that with every student because some students didn't need it. They weren't sleep. Everybody wasn't sleeping in class.
Right.
But he did. And so I just, everybody's not going to have the same situation, but that changed something for him, for us to have compassion and be like, well, what can we do to help you, get some different kind of help, or how can we help you at school at least?
Yeah. And the other thing that my husband has told me multiple times is the variation of who moves up and down does not change that much.
That part.
Do we need to really put a spotlight that, she's still at the top. She never moves. So it really is okay. These, like you were saying, these students don't need it. Yeah. These ones have something going on within them for whatever those reasons are. And so really niching down and figuring out what makes each of those kids tick and how you can support them is going to change your overall classroom dynamic more than this old tool that kind of,
It's the same students.
It gets passed down because you do your student teaching, and that's what your mentor did, and that worked for her. And so sometimes things need to be recycled and not, trash and not recycled, and just taken out and be like, that's what we knew then. We know better now. So we're not going to bring this back next year. And I'm going to try a different approach. And I would just challenge the parents to opt out. And I would challenge any teachers who listen to this to really try a different approach and really step back and go, did that work? And I think they would find that the new approach would work better than the chart.
You know what else is that substitute? Isn't dealing with what I'm dealing with today. And last night, and what me and his dad had to do, and how we had to talk to him, how his siblings had to talk to him, like, you're not bad, red is bad, and so he perseverates on, red is bad, and he's not at school today, and she's doing, not saying she's a bad person. That was the system that was in place for her to use, but I'm telling parents to at least speak up so that you can say, what are the alternatives? Because I don't know how long, well, I do know how he is about things, how long he's going to be saying that he got on red. You saw him earlier. He was talking to, that's his topic, is that he's got on red and that he's bad. And that's where it ends. He just keeps on saying that. And every time he says it, I just want to, cringe. We pour into him like, what can we do? Sometimes you do make wrong choices, but even if you made a wrong choice, you're not a bad person. You can always make a different choice. Because he's a kid. Sometimes he'd be doing stuff that he's not supposed to, but he's not bad.
Right.
To make him a bad kid just means that your choice, that you made a wrong choice, and you can make a different choice the next time. And so they don't have to deal with what we have to deal with last night and today. And
we don't know how much longer that's going to be a part of his story. And how
he was shooketh about being, he was not happy. He just knows that he doesn't want to get there. And even thinking about that during the day, I'm thinking the anxiety that it brings for a kid to be like, I can't make any mistakes. Look what we're asking students to do, our kids.
Yeah.
And especially younger kids, even if they don't have a disability, their brains are still forming, right? So just thinking about someone who's highly anxious, like my oldest is highly anxious. And so when she saw those things, we talked about it now because she's 19. I hated those charts because I was always wondering, and she was a straight A student. So it's not just so, but she was still thinking like, I don't even want to bring that kind of attention to myself, because she didn't want nobody to, she just wished that she could just be a ghost in school. So nobody could see her.
It was still impacting her learning because she was still thinking about
that's going to get me off of green.
Yeah.
Period. Not that she would, but she did think about that, because it could be, you never know. You could have a bad day. The teacher could think that you're talking or think that you're doing this, and then that caused her so much anxiety now that she's older. It's the benefit of having older kids.
Yeah, they can tell you.
Yeah, they can tell me.
And it was still impacting her learning.
Right.
Because she was still, even though she never got moved down, she was still thinking about what would happen if I get moved down.
What happens if I get moved down? Now, she knew she wouldn't get in trouble at home, because by that time we had already known, we just do discipline different around here.
Right.
But that still didn't take away, even though she knew one is like, call your parents. That wasn't like a motivator for her, because she knew that we would listen and figure out what was going on, and then take steps. So it wasn't like she was afraid, like, oh my gosh, it was just like the embarrassment of the classroom was what was worse than getting a call. Like everybody be like, ooh, oh, you got it. Or when the whole class gets punished for one kid's thing, like everybody loses their recess. She was like, she really didn't like that, because she was like, I didn't do anything, and now we don't get recess.
Yeah.
Because Courtney was writing a note to her boyfriend in class, and now
we used to do those folded papers. There was no texting back in my day, so we did have to do the papers. I did get in trouble for passing notes.
Uh-oh. See, I didn't know that. Whoops. Red. No, I'm just kidding. Anyhow, I'm digressing.
All right, that's our take on behavior charts. So
Yeah.
we didn't hold back. So there it is. We don't like them.
Bad. They get red. Behavior charts get put on red.
Right. Exactly.
So hopefully you guys found this little open dialogue conversation helpful. I would say to ask what type of system that your teacher is utilizing, and maybe listen to the why behind, because we want to try to cultivate collaborative relationships with your kids' teachers. We are pro teachers. Both our husbands are teachers. I was in education. She is a SLPA. So it's not against that, but we do want and care about the health of your family unit, because after school is done, that's what you're going to be left with. So it's important to ask questions, and there's nothing wrong to ask questions and make suggestions. So I always don't like to be complaining, be like, you're not doing this. I can't believe you guys do this. I'd be like, do you know if there's an alternative to behavior charts? And these are some things that I've seen. Have you heard about these things? Or is anybody in your school using these things? So that it's solution based. The teacher may not know. I didn't know until I started learning better. I just utilize the same thing. So
yep,
that's what I say.
Sure.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next podcast.
Yeah.